back to Mind Over MS, produced by Energy Over Matter. So we are at episode 12 today, and we will be discussing dairy and how it affects people with MS. But I would broaden that out to a wider demographic because I don't really think anybody should be drinking milk. Before we even get into the actual science behind why people with MS and people in general should avoid dairy, I would just like to acknowledge, first of all, the fact that I understand why doctors don't really talk about diet. And it is one of the reasons why so far in this podcast, I haven't talked about diet, although I think that it is absolutely fundamental to rebuilding your body and stopping any new attacks happening with MS. And really diet for any disease for that matter. But diet, the doctors don't get a lot of training about it. And so, that is a real shortcoming they have. So we're not going to blame the doctors. But on a second note, anybody, even the doctors that are well informed about diet and how it affects people, I don't think that there's a very good compliance with people in following diet. And so it must be frustrating for doctors if they're telling patients, what it is that they need to be working on with their diet and to have people not comply or to follow that. And so with giving the doctors a little bit of slack on this one, I also want to give you a little bit of slack because I understand how diet can be a really big thing to change. And there's many reasons why that is. Some of them can be cultural. So you might come from a country or a background where food is very specific and the expectation of how people eat and how they interact while they're eating. I even know for myself some of the things like I fast, and I know that you should really have your big meal at lunch and not at the dinner meal. But because I have a family and it's my only chance where we all come together to eat and it's the healthy meals that I'm cooking, I really changed that around because I think that it's more important to eat with my family that one healthy meal a day than it is to get my fasting right. So I understand that for yourself too, that there's going to be a lot of reasons why you are not going to want to comply with the diet, but I'm going to suggest of all of the things that you could, and I have a ton of them, I could make almost endless podcasts just about diet alone, and we will get to diet. I just wanted to, in the beginning on the podcast, focus on things where I thought they were free, they were easy, and the most people would be likely to try and to successfully implement. But that being said, please, dairy is the one that I just really recommend that you don't have it. And I would say forever and for everybody, the rest of your family too. Nobody really should be having dairy. And I'm going to talk about that first just at a common sense level because I don't think that we need to have a science background and I don't think that we need to understand even all the mechanisms of the body today for the understanding that we really don't need cow's milk. And at a basic level, we are the only species that drinks past the age of weaning. And I'm going to make a caveat here again as well too. If you are a woman who didn't lactate and you have to feed formula or you have to substitute cow's milk later for your baby, this is not a shot at you. This is not to say that was bad and you shouldn't do it because I've also had C-sections. So I understand that if there is a choice between two alternatives, you always pick the one that is the best choice you're going to make at the time. So there are circumstances where absolutely, if you're going to have to substitute with the cow's milk because that's what you need to do by circumstance, don't feel guilty, don't feel shame, just embrace that because it's not good for our psyche either to go against the grain for everything. But if we are adults now, we're not babies anymore, we don't need milk, why would we drink milk? And then not even just our own species milk, why are we drinking other animals' milk? So even just that, I think, doesn't really make a lot of sense. And you see culturally around the world that not all cultures drink milk. And this is another thing, I guess I can lead into this too. Everybody always says that MS is caused just by living in a northern latitude, and that might be true. Because we don't get enough vitamin D, and that definitely impacts not just MS, but a whole wide range of health conditions. But if you look at the northern latitude countries, but then you go longitude and you go the other way, how come in the Asian northern countries, they don't have the same incident as MS that you find in North America and in Europe, in parts of Russia? And I would say that's also, if you look at that, it just makes sense. It's dairy because in those cultures, they're not eating dairy. So there must, in my mind, then just be, even at that, these basic common sense factors, a reason to pause and think maybe dairy is not right. But let's look at some of the other issues. So dairy And this is why I'm going to say nobody should be having dairy. So don't even get to the part of MS yet. Let's just talk about people in general. Upwards of like from 65 to 80% of people, depending on what cultural background you come from, not cultural, sorry, ethnic background, are lactose intolerant. So that's only the one part of the milk that is causing so much stomach issues. And people that are lactose intolerant, they know it because they'll have that ice cream and then they instantly get the bloat or the gas or whatever symptoms they're going to get from it. So they know right away, that's not really good for me. But the one that triggers the MS, it's a little bit trickier. So the casein is the culprit here. And casein is much like gluten is for people who are non-celiac. If you have celiac disease and you eat gluten, you know right away because your body cannot process it and it's very uncomfortable GI symptoms. But for the rest of us, gluten, once it passes into the body, can be disruptive in so many ways. It's not like a one-to-one thing and it doesn't happen instantly. It's a bit of a slow burn. So part of the problem with the caseins, that the protein in milk, is they digest very slowly. So it takes them a very long time to move through your the entire tract, which means there's a lot of opportunity for things to fail and to go wrong. So one of the things that causes almost all allergens and issues in the body is something called leaky gut. So this is when the membrane becomes permeable and the tight junctions they open up and larger particles can move through, like in this case, the milk protein casein. And so once that's in your bloodstream, it floats around. And for people with MS, we also have a leaky brain barrier. So that also should be a tight junction and nothing should get in there. But in the case, ours are also open and they're susceptible for things passing through. And when the caseins pass into the brain, what happens is it is very similar to the myelin, the coating of the nerves that is attacked in MS. And once the coating on the nerve comes off, the connection of the wire and how quickly the signals transmit, they slow down and they get disrupted. And that's what's creating all the neurological conditions. So there's something in your body called a myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein. And this is something that has two purposes. So one is that it creates the immune response. So once that casein is in the brain, it's triggering your immune system to say, there's something in here, it's not supposed to be here, let's go get it. Okay, so now your B cells, your T cells, your lymphocytes, everything's activated and it's going there to attack this, which normally would be a good thing, except for the fact that the casein, which is a milk animal protein, is very similar to the protein of our brain, the myelin. And so it is now attacking the myelin. And so this is what's triggering the relapses and the attacks and what's going to eventually lead to the disability progression. And then the second thing that's happening with those oligodendrocytes is they are also the thing that repair myelin. So if you give them the job only of attacking constantly because you keep drinking the milk, you keep having cheese, you keep having ice cream, so you keep putting more and more in your body, so it's always attacking, it's then not doing the job of repairing the myelin. So you're double whamming it. You're killing more myelin and you're failing to repair the myelin that was already there. So put on the brakes, stop drinking the dairy. And this, I'm going to say what happened to me is I think I should back up all the way to the beginning. I had a lot of ear infections as a child. And as a child, I didn't know, and my mom obviously didn't know this either, that the dairy was causing the ear infections. And what would happen then is once I had the ear infections triggered by the dairy, I then have to take antibiotics. And the more you take the antibiotics, the more it affects your gut lining and the microbiome, which is leading to more permeability, which leads to more of the milk being able to seep through into your blood, and you get on a hamster wheel, and then the cycle continues. I didn't realize this until my daughter, who she didn't like to nurse about after 6 months, and she was really struggling. She didn't want to, so I start trying to feed her formula instead. It's not really working. The doctors are telling me it's okay, just give her full fat yogurt or something else that will at least give her what she needs. So I take their advice because at the time I still believed that allopathic Western medicine was on my side and helping me. So I start feeding her that too, and she's all of a sudden she gets ear infections too, and she ends up with tubes as well. And now she takes antibiotics. And for what had happened to me, and how I know that the milk affecting my whole life was also causing constipation. And here's another one that will. Again, what's causing it, the chicken or the egg situation is MS will cause you to have poor nerve conduction on the vagal nerve, which is affecting your digestion and the motility, the peristalsis of your bowels. So because the nerves are impaired, the transit time is slower. So obviously you're going to have constipation. Anyone with MS knows this is a problem. But the more you have constipation, the more the food is sitting in there and you have this leaky gut, the more the endotoxins and things are pushing back into your bloodstream, crossing now into the blood-brain barrier. They're up there again. It's a very hard situation to get out of, which is why I'm going to suggest please just take the dairy out. Because when I had taken dairy out, when I realized that it was triggering my MS, and I realized that pretty early on, even before I had read Hilary Swank's book or Dr. Terry Wall's protocol, where they're suggesting also dairy is an issue. I just knew for myself that it was aggravating my body. But I didn't cut it out completely. It was like, okay, well, I stopped drinking milk. I put almond milk in my smoothies. And, sometimes I would put like cream in my coffee if I was at a restaurant. And I was addicted to cheese. And there really is an addiction. That is a real thing. It creates opioid in your brain. And so the more you eat cheese, the more you want cheese. It is by far, because I've given up dairy, the hardest thing to give up. So with that being said, though, with the dairy, I'd given it up mostly. And then I decided, I'd heard, and I'll talk about this in a minute too, that it was better to have goat or sheep milk because the caseins were different. And so I switched, and I didn't even just do feta goat cheese, but I added back in something called buffalo milk. And it looked really gross because it stratifies weird because it's not pasteurized. So you're getting this now in Canada from underground markets because it's against the law to have unpasteurized milk here. I don't know where you live in the world. I think it's crazy that they give you so many dangerous black box drugs, no problem, but unpasteurized milk is a huge no-no. But so anyway, the buffalo milk, I start adding it back in just to coffee, so it's only a little bit. And I had never really thought that I had arthritis or any kind of pain, but I had in the past had a lot of hip pain when I would sleep. And that hip pain had gone away when I changed my diet, but I hadn't really thought much about it because I was really more worried about changing my MS symptoms. But once I added that buffalo milk back in, and it was about 2 years after completely being off dairy, my hips started to hurt after about 3 or 4 days. And then it was easier to put it together to now say, oh, that's absolutely the buffalo milk because I had been pain-free for a long time, not realizing that I felt better without it. But as soon as I added back in, that's why elimination diets work so well. As soon as it came back in my body went, whoa, that doesn't feel good. Take it out again. I got rid of the buffalo milk and I'm fine. So while we're actually on this topic again, then I guess we'll talk about the different types of casein. So there's casein A1 and a B1, and these A1 and A2. And so what had happened is originally the cows were all making the one kind of protein, but Northern Europe, the cows had like a genetic mutation to the A1. And what happened is then those cows produced more milk. And so people decided, because they were better producers, we're going to use that. And they spread those cows into North America. You find them in New Zealand and Australia. And those are the cows that really have the worst ratio of the caseins to the whey and the other proteins that are in there. So they tend to trigger this neurological response way worse. But there are some cows that create the A2 caseins, and these ones I'm gonna attach in the show notes some studies that talk about it one way and another. I'm going to let you make up your own mind, and maybe like the elimination diet, maybe take all of it out for a little while and you could add some back in and see how it affects you. Because I don't think that the evidence on this one was clear enough for me to say one way or another. But apparently what they say is that the cows that are mostly found in France, Switzerland, and in Italy have this other casein, the casein A2, and that one is easier to digest and it's not causing the same problems in people. So if you can find imported cheese from those countries, I don't know that you could really get imported milk because I don't think it would stay good, but I would think cheese is what most people are looking for with that opium addiction to it. And you could try it out and see, but I would say take everything out at least for 3 months first to get a baseline of how much better you feel before trying to put one back in to see if it triggers you or not. But anyway, what happens now when you have these immune cells that are now coming in to attack the myelin at the same time as it's attacking these proteins in your brain is your immune cells, once they have a trigger in there, they start to like proliferate and they make more of them. They make antibodies, and the antibodies create more and more of themselves with these little receptors that go out and they search and they find the things that they're targeting. And so what happens is as you start to miscalculate your immune system, saying that you have this foreign invader, that even when the foreign invader is kind of gone, your body has these antibodies that will trigger every time to make this attack again. So you really then need to be careful that you're not putting that offender back in and triggering those antibodies to, be a hypervigilant again. You really got to quiet that down. Now, I don't know long term what the prognosis is for reprogramming the immune system. I hope that the science is going to figure out, better strategies and tactics for this. I know with some things like homeopathy, it's possible to introduce things back in at a smaller dose, and it gives your body a chance to figure out how to fight those things. In this case, I would say just for the ease of operation, just take milk out and don't really add it back in. There's not really a reason why you need this. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, where are you going to get your calcium from? But that's actually like, again, if you look just at the science and the research, countries that drink the most milk have the highest osteoporosis rates. And that's because the kind of calcium, once it's coming with the saturated fat from the milk, it actually doesn't go into your bones. It actually strips calcium out of them. So it makes your bones more fragile. So you really want like bioavailable types of calcium, which you're going to find in things like arugula and spinach and broccoli. And then you're also getting all these other added nutrient benefits. So really there is no reason I can think of that anybody would need to drink milk. So I feel like that was quite a bit of information. I hope I covered it all because, there's a lot of factors in the dairy and what it does in your body. I am going to leave some show notes, some links to some of the studies that you can find. One book that would be interesting, if for those of you that have MS, you might already have the Walls Protocol or some of the other dietary books on this, but there was one called the China Study, and I can't think of the two authors' name right now, but it was interesting because, again, they're looking at these large demographic studies that would suggest that the countries that don't have dairy actually have lower rates of all diseases, not just MS, because they're actually linking all central nervous system disorders, things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer. It's all being actually linked to dairy as well. Now, I wouldn't say dairy is the only cause of these things, but it's definitely a trigger. It's definitely been associated scientifically, and I would say then common sense as well, that we should be avoiding this. And I try to make everybody in my family avoid it. It's a little hard because I have family that eats outside of what I feed them. And, when they go to party, I know everybody's ordering, cheese pizza, and kids are having ice cream at parties. And it's pretty hard to do it all. But, and I know for you too, it's going to be hard to give it up because our lives are based around food, and in the diets that we eat, the fast food, the restaurants, the barbecues, the birthday parties we go to, it is very difficult to follow dietary restrictions, but it is well worth it. So I want to be an example to you here too. I changed my diet 3 years ago during this relapse, and over that 3 years, I followed it strictly. Besides the one time I tried to introduce buffalo milk, other than that, I have not failed to remove dairy completely, as well as gluten. Although the gluten's a little bit harder because there's a lot of cross-contaminations and a lot of ways you could be getting it without being aware of it. But dairy is much easier to be aware of what's in it and to avoid it. And I have gone from being bedridden to walking with a cane, to walking without a cane, to becoming a yoga teacher. So I want you to know that the power of your diet is incredible. And I know it's difficult to implement it. And I know it's difficult to stay with it and to explain it all the time and have to always modify what you're eating. But Do you want to be blind, or do you want to have ice cream cake? Do you want to be in a wheelchair, or do you want to have another slice of cheese pizza? And I think that for any of us that are now facing these types of difficult decisions, the picture should become clearer and clearer, and the decision should get easier to make, because discipline is the difference between what you want now and what you want most. And I hope for all of us, we all have a reason to want something more in our future than the current temptation of a milk chocolate snack or whatever it is we're going to eat today. So with that being said, I just want to thank you for tuning in again. Please subscribe to the channel for future content of general health, things that you can do with your MS or just in general. You can also check out the Energy Over Matter channel on my website at energyovermatter.com, where you can find more information on PEMF, yoga, and meditation. So have a great week. Be blessed. Namaste.